Legion, and welcome to my channel. My name is Ludi, and today we're going to do our EU4 1.30 Government Reforms Guide. And this guide will be going over the monarchy reforms, monastic ones, republican ones, as well as the special government reforms. If you guys are interested in seeing more videos such as this one, leave a like and let me know in the comments below. I want to do a special pirates reform guide mixed in with how to actually form a pirate nation in EU4. If you enjoy binge watching my videos also once in a while, consider subscribing. It would really mean the world to me. And if you guys want to watch me live, you can always check me out over on Twitch. I do almost daily streams from 8 to 12 p.m. Japan time, and would love to have you over on Twitch with me. We're going to start by discussing the monarchy government reforms, and we've selected Austria as our country of choice here, as it has a special tier 1 government reform. In most cases, countries will give you the option between feudal, nobility, or autocracy. Between these two, autocracy is actually better, but because most nations already start with feudal nobility selected, I recommend to keep it as that. It's not a big difference, and 50 government reform progress is a massive deal in the early game, so you can change to autocracy later down the line once you have extra government reform progress. That being said, as you can see, we have a special Austrian Archduchy that we start off with. For Austria, this is actually a pretty good government reform. Whenever you have special government reforms such as the Austrian Archduchy, which later reforms into the Austrian Imperial government reform, or the Prussian monarchy, and so on, keep those. Usually those are better than whatever other options you have available. As you're tier 2, you normally get the option between strengthen noble privileges and curtail noble privileges. I recommend always going for strengthen, which gives you plus 15 national manpower modifier. The 10% tax modifier is really not that great because tax income is not going to be that much worth it. It is worth it in the early game, but as you progress, tax income massively reduces the amount of income that actually gives you, so don't ever choose tax modifier. As your third reform, you can choose between monthly autonomy change and max promoted cultures. If you're going for a world conquest, go for max promoted cultures. It will actually help you out if it's not a one faith. In almost any other circumstance, go for monthly autonomy change. It is vital that you get this in the early game, especially once you've conquered new provinces. You want to lower the autonomy in those provinces as fast as possible so you get the full amount of income from those provinces. As a tier 4 reform, you can either get a free admin policy, leader cost reduction, or advisor cost reduction. This is a bit of a tricky one. I personally prefer to get the admin free policy because I like to mix in my admin policies whenever I get them, and I like to always have 2 active admin policies without losing any admin mana points. But in certain circumstances, for example for Bohemia, it's better to go with advisor cost reduction, as mixing this in with Bohemia's national ideas and a few other modifiers means that you're going to have ridiculously cheap advisors. For your tier 5, if you don't have available parliamentarism, or if you don't have the option to go for state generals, when choosing between royal decree, aristocratic court, and general estates, I always recommend going for general estates, as the production efficiency is a massive boost in the mid to late game. That being said, if you are a colonial power, I actually recommend you go for parliamentarism, which will get rid of the nobility estate, which is not great for multiplayer. So in multiplayer, do not go for parliamentarism. But if you're going colonial strong in a single player game, parliamentarism is going to help you out a lot by giving you extra colonist and settler chance, and even colonists. States general is not really that great. I don't recommend you use this unless you just want to exploit and change your dynasty and ruler. For your tier 6, always, and I mean always, go for governing capacity plus 250. Governing capacity is extremely important in this 1.30 update. The minus 10 autonomy in territories is good, but governing capacity is going to be much more worth it than the minimum autonomy in territories. And as your last reform for monarchies, you get the option of either becoming a republic or a theocracy, or if not, you can get the absolutism increase or the admin policies possible. I always recommend going for max absolutism increase and yearly absolutism. But that being said, sometimes it's better to become a republic or a theocratic government based on your situation. When discussing theocracies, the first available reform is going to be either clerical state, which is the worst one honestly, it just gives you 5% tax, or the monastic order, which makes it available that you have heirs and rulers as generals, and you get minus 20 fort maintenance. But the problem is it is fixed to a duchy rank. So for example, Köln here is actually a kingdom rank, so going for monastic order means that you're going to downgrade your government rank, so do not do that if you don't already start off as a monastic order. As a tier 2, you get to choose between tolerance of the true faith, manpower recovery speed, or if you have exploration ideas, mission to civilize. In this situation, manpower recovery speed can be extremely good. However, if you have issues with unrest, increasing your tolerance of the true faith can be ridiculously overpowered, especially if you stack this up as you go along. So it's really an issue of whether you need more troops. That means you want to have your manpower recovery faster. I personally prefer to go for the manpower recovery speed. As a third reform, you get to choose between yearly prestige +1, morale of armies +10, and dev cost reduction -5. This is a massively difficult reform to go for because both morale of armies and dev cost reduction are great. That being said, if you're in a multiplayer, always go for morale of armies. Dev cost is great too, but you really want to get the boost to your morale of armies to win the battles to come. The fourth tier, you get to choose between corruption reduction, stab cost, yearly army tradition, global trade power, or goods produced +10% and production of grain and wine +75 and 50%. This is available only if you have a grain or wine province at least, and if you are a Catholic nation or your primary culture is Scottish or you are within the Celtic culture group. This is always going to be the best one to choose from, but if you don't have it available, second best would be the global trade power, especially if you're a trade power yourself, or third best, the army tradition. Moving on to tier 5, you get the option of becoming a republic should you wish to, or becoming a kingdom. If you want to continue as a monastic order or as a theocratical government, you get to choose between idea cost reduction -10 and yearly absolutism. This is a no-brainer. Always go for idea cost reduction. Having -10% idea cost is insanely big. For your tier 6, you can choose between national unrest -1 and diplo relations +1, maximum absolutism +20, or national unrest -1, and enable parliament. This also means that you get rid of your nobility, so it is a tricky one. If you are going as a colonial nation, I recommend going for theocratic democracy. If you're not going for colonialism or for a colonial empire, then I recommend that you choose the clerical commissions. As your tier 7, you get 1 extra missionary and missionary strength, max promoted cultures +2 if you have humanist ideas or you are in the pagan religious group, or +1 free policies. This is overall +1 free policies, so as you can imagine, this is the best one to go for. As your last government reform for theocracies, you can choose for war score versus other religions -30, global crusade, which gives you a special CB allowing you to force your religion on any neighboring heathens, as well as it reduces the cost to enforce religion through war by 40%. Also, if you have humanist ideas, you can choose the +2 tolerance of heretics and heathens. One state under God is extremely overpowered. Lowering the war score cost versus other religions by 30% and stacking that up is insane. We'll be discussing the Republic government reforms now. If you are within the Holy Roman Empire, you can become a free city. All the blue ones here are free cities, including Hamburg. Free cities get a special tier 1 government reform as a republic, where they get -10 dev cost reduction, +10 trade efficiency. But the problem is, once they have a secondary city, they lose the government reform. You can only be a free city if you have only 1 province. So once you do lose the government reform, you can choose between plutocracy, which gives you an extra merchant. It also gives you the merchant republic mechanics, including the factions, namely aristocrats, traders, and guilds, all of which give you different bonuses here, such as morale of armies, construction costs, goods produced, or global trade boosts. There's also noble elites and oligarchy. Both of them absolutely suck. Always go for plutocracy as a republic as your first tier 1 government reform, unless you have some special government reform. For tier 2, you can choose between national unrest, random candidate bonus, and a yearly republican tradition. Go for the republican tradition. Keeping your republican tradition is an issue, so I really recommend that you always prioritize going for republican tradition in this instance. National unrest is not bad, but it's not as great as republicanism. For tier 3, you can choose length of election term, reduction by 1 year, or increase it by 1 year, and maximum absolutism, governing capacity +250, trade power abroad, and diplo relations +1, or yearly corruption reduction. I recommend going for governing capacity +250. This will help you out so much, and it's great to get this so early on in the game. For tier 3, you get state maintenance -25, governing capacity again +250, or global trade power. Always go, once more, for governing capacity. Having 500 governing capacity from the early game, as a republic is ridiculously overpowered. Tier 5, if you don't have plutocracy, you can go for parliamentarism. If you do have plutocracy, your only option is going to be the presidential system, so go for the presidential system. Tier 6, you can go for either stab cost reduction or diplomats +1. I recommend diplomats +1 if you have a bigger empire and you need the extra diplomats, but stab cost reduction is actually quite good too, since increasing your stability can be a lot more expensive as a republic if you have lower republican tradition. If you can manage to keep your republican tradition at 100, the extra diplomat is going to be extremely useful. For tier 7, you can choose between admin policies possible +1 or diplo policies possible +1. It really depends what policies you're gunning for in this instance. I recommend going for actually diplo policies possible, as you can get extra diplo policies to boost up your trade and production income when you mix in the right idea sets, but admin 1 is not bad either. For tier 7, either manpower recovery speed, morale of armies, or if you have the naval ideas, naval fire, and republican tradition reduction, always go for morale of armies, no brainer right here. For tier 9, advisor cost -5 and possible advisors +1, minimum autonomy in territories, or max promoted cultures. I recommend going for the advisor cost reduction and advisors possible. For extra cheap advisors, autonomy change is not bad, but unless you're going for a world conquest as a republic, which is a strange way of going for a world conquest as, I recommend going for advisor cost reduction always. For tier 10, you can either choose to become a kingdom, become a theocracy, or either +25 max absolutism or re-election cost -10 and admin free policies +1. If you want to go for a big empire or strong empire, go for the max absolutism, as it's going to be useful getting extra absolutism to expand easier and faster. If you're not going for a massive empire, go for the re-election cost reduction and admin free policies. It will help you a lot more. Next, we'll be discussing the tribal reforms. As a tribe, you can either choose between tribal despotism or tribal monarchy. Income from vassals is useless, as you previously realized. Core creation is great, so you should always go for this. If, for example, you start off as a tribal monarchy, I actually recommend you use your first 50 reform points to switch to despotism, as this is considerably better than the other one. As your tier 2, you can go for national manpower or corruption reduction and national tax. Always go for the 20% national manpower. As the third one, religious unity and stab cost reduction or land maintenance. I recommend going for the religious unity. It will help you out a lot, including the stab cost reduction, but if you don't have issues with your religion, you can always go for maintenance. I personally think this is a lot more useful, especially for empires that keep on growing, or if you are a horde. For the tier 4, either go for core cost reduction and stab cost reduction or governing capacity and maximum absolutism. I recommend the governing capacity. It will help so much to get the extra 150 governing capacity. As your 5th tier reform, you can choose to either become a monarchy, republic, theocracy, or become a horde. We're gonna go for the horde so we can show off what the horde has to offer. It's really not much. You just choose your first tier 1 to step nomads. You keep the other ones, and you can also change from the become horde to the unified horde identity or the barbaric despoilers reform as your 5th reform. I recommend going for the barbaric despoilers, which gives you a lot more power gain from raising provinces. Last but not least, we're going to discuss the special government reform, starting with the Indian ones. Most Asian nations can also go for plutocracy, which gives the extra merchant, as well as if you're a Sunni, Shia, or Ibadi nation, you can go for Ikta, which is great. And between the 4 of these, I always would recommend going for Ikta, but if you have the Indian Sultanate available, do choose the Indian Sultanate. It will definitely help you out a lot, and it also gives the Ikta taxation ability, so you have the same interactions as you would if you went for the Ikta government reform. As a tier 2 reform, you can go for empower the polygarchs, that gives infantry combat ability and dev cost reduction, or the free policies. Definitely go for the infantry combat ability and dev cost reduction. As your 3rd reform, you get the 2 default ones plus the fort maintenance reduction and governing capacity. Definitely go for the fort maintenance and governing capacity. As your 4th tier, go for the Maratha Council, which can give you up to 10% discipline based on the scale of Maratha's land ownership. The rest of these are basically the same as the default monarchy reform, so we're going to switch on over. As I previously mentioned, there are a ton of other special tier 1 and tier 2 government reforms, such as the feudal theocracy available to Rasids at the start and to Ardabil. Keep these, as these give you special interactions and bonuses that you will not get as any of the other nations except some specific ones. In the Japanese islands, you can also get the daimyo or the independent daimyo if you're not a subject of Ashikaga anymore. You are not allowed to switch on over from this. Same way, shogunate cannot change away from shogunate unless some special conditions are met. As a general note, there are a ton of special government reforms, either tier 1 or 2, that you can either change or not change away from. I highly recommend that you do not change away from them because they normally give out special abilities to the countries that you have these available reforms for. So for example, the Russian Principality gives you awesome Russian government abilities, governing capacity, and so on. It's way better than feudal nobility and autocracy. That's gonna be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you also want me to do a government reform video on pirate republics, which are a special type of government that definitely deserves its own separate video, then leave a comment below. Let me know if you'd like me to do that video, and I can make it a special video where I show you how to become a pirate republic and which government reforms to go for. If you want to see more content from my channel, do consider subscribing and leaving the bell button on. It would really mean the world to me and would help me out so much and encourage me to do more videos like this. And I also want to give a very big thank you to all of my patrons and channel members. Thank you so much, guys, for all the support you've been offering me. I wouldn't be here without you right now. If anybody else wants to become a patron or a channel member, you can check the links in the description. So until the next one, have a great day, everybody.